My dear ones, people often look at me now and think my life has always been peaceful. They see an old woman with silver hair, sitting quietly with a cup of tea, smiling gently at the world. What they don't see is the little girl I once was, the child who stood soaked in rain on a Christmas Eve, believing the world had finally decided to erase us. I was 10 years old when everything fell apart. That winter, my mother Sarah and her 3 children lived on a ranch that didn't belong to us. We stayed in a small wooden shack behind the main fields, where the walls were thin, the floor was dirt, and the wind always found a way inside. My mother worked from sunrise until darkness, scrubbing, cooking, cleaning, always owing more than she earned. The foreman made sure of that. My father had vanished 2 years earlier. One morning he said he was going to look for work, kissed my mother's cheek, and never returned. No letter. No explanation. Just silence. From that day on, my mother learned how to survive without asking for mercy. That Christmas Eve, the sky was heavy and dark. Rain fell hard enough to sting the skin. I remember the smell of wet earth and fear mixed together. Earlier that day, my mother had confronted the foreman. She had seen numbers that didn't add up, wages stolen, supplies missing. She believed honesty would protect her. She was wrong. By nightfall, the foreman came to our shack with 2 men behind him. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. His words were sharp enough to cut. "You have 30 minutes, he said. "Pack your things and leave. If I see you here again, you'll regret it." My little sister started crying. My brother stood frozen. My mother said nothing. She packed what little we owned, 2 pots, a worn rosary, a folded photograph. Then she wrapped us close and led us outside. The rain swallowed us whole. We walked without direction, our clothes soaked, feet sinking into thick mud. The cold cut deep. I held my brother's hand and felt him trembling. My mother carried my sister and whispered prayers under her breath, begging for strength she no longer had. Halfway down the road, my mother stopped. That was the first time I ever saw her break. She knelt in the mud, hugging all of us at once, crying as if her heart had finally given up fighting. Then she wiped her face, stood up straight, and made a decision. "There's one place left," she said. "A farm beyond the hills. They say the man there lost his family and closed his heart to the world. But maybe kindness still lives somewhere inside him." We walked toward that last hope with nothing but fear and faith. Hours later, through the rain, we saw iron gates and a large house standing silent in the storm. One faint light burned in an upstairs window. My mother raised her hand and knocked. And for a moment, nothing happened. We didn't know it yet. But the man behind that gate would either turn us away to die in the cold, or change our lives forever in ways none of us could have imagined. The knock sounded small against that enormous door. My mother knocked again, harder this time, her knuckles red and shaking. The rain dripped from her hair onto the stone steps. My sister whimpered softly in her arms, and my brother squeezed my hand as if letting go might make us disappear. At last, the door opened, but only a crack. A woman's face appeared. Pale. Tired. Her hair was pulled back tightly, and her eyes held no warmth. "Yes?" she asked sharply. My mother swallowed. "I'm sorry to bother you. We were sent away from the ranch. We have children. We only need shelter for the night." The woman sighed as if my mother had asked for the moon. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "This is private property." Before my mother could reply, another voice came from inside the house. Deep. Broken. Heavy with grief. "Who is it?" The woman turned. "Strangers," she replied. "They're asking to stay." There was silence. Long enough for hope to rise, and then start dying again. "Send them away," the voice said. "I don't need trouble." My mother nodded, already turning to leave. She didn't beg. Pride was the only thing she had left. But as she stepped back into the rain, my sister began to cough, a deep, frightening sound. The kind that rattles the chest. The door opened wider. "Wait," the man said. He stood there in a dark coat, tall and rigid, his face lined by sorrow rather than age. His eyes flicked from one child to the next, pausing on my sister's shaking body. "How long have you been outside?" he asked. "Hours," my mother replied honestly. Another silence. Then he moved aside. "One night," he said. "That's all." We stepped into warmth for the first time in what felt like forever. The house smelled of wood polish and old memories. Everything was neat, untouched. As if time had stopped there. The woman, whom we later learned was the housekeeper, showed us to a small room near the back. No smiles. No kindness. Just survival. That night, we slept on the floor wrapped in spare blankets. I listened to the rain pounding against the windows and wondered if this place would be another temporary miracle that vanished by morning. In the days that followed, we learned the rules. Stay out of sight. Speak softly. Don't touch anything. The man, Mr. Hawthorne, rarely looked at us. He spent most of his time in his study, staring at papers he never seemed to read. One evening, I overheard the housekeeper speaking to him. "They'll become a problem," she said. "People like that always do." I felt my chest tighten. But then something unexpected happened. One morning, Mr. Hawthorne found me in the kitchen, trying to sweep crumbs into a pile so we wouldn't be blamed for the mess. He watched silently before asking, "How old are you?" 10, I said. "You work hard," he muttered. From that day on, he began to notice us. Not kindly. Not warmly. But he noticed. And sometimes, that is how miracles begin. What we didn't know was that the man who let us stay had lost everything he loved, and the kindness he would soon show us would force him to face a pain he had buried for years. By the third week in that house, silence had become our shield. My mother worked wherever the housekeeper allowed. Scrubbing floors, washing clothes, cooking meals she would never eat. She never complained. She never rested. She moved as if making herself smaller might keep us invisible. Mr. Hawthorne watched all of it from a distance. He never raised his voice. Never smiled. But his eyes followed us more than he realized. One afternoon, everything changed. The housekeeper had left early, and the house felt strangely quiet. I was carrying a basket of firewood through the hallway when I heard shouting from the study. It wasn't anger. It was grief. I stopped outside the door. Mr. Hawthorne's voice cracked as he spoke to someone who wasn't there. He said names softly, 2 of them, like prayers. I didn't mean to listen. But when the door suddenly opened, I froze. He stared at me, shock written across his face. "How long have you been standing there?" "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I was just..." He looked ready to scold me, but then his expression changed. "You heard," he said flatly. I nodded. He exhaled slowly and sank into a chair. "They were my wife and daughter," he said, his voice hollow. "A fever took them both within a week." I didn't know why I spoke next. But I did. "My father left too," I said. "But not because he died." Mr. Hawthorne looked up. He walked away, I continued. "Sometimes that hurts worse." Silence filled the room. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. Not with joy, but with recognition. "Yes," he said quietly. "It does." From that day on, he changed. He began asking questions, small ones at first. What we liked to eat. How old my brother was. Whether my sister slept through the night. The housekeeper noticed. She pulled my mother aside one evening. "You're getting too comfortable," she warned. "Don't forget your place." But my mother said nothing. Because she saw what I saw. A man who had buried his heart was starting to feel again. Then trouble came knocking. The foreman from the ranch arrived unannounced, claiming my mother owed him money. His voice was loud. His eyes cruel. Mr. Hawthorne stood between him and my mother. "You are not welcome here," he said coldly. The foreman laughed. "You don't know who these people are." "I know enough," Mr. Hawthorne replied. "Leave. Or I call the authorities." The foreman left, but his threat lingered. That night, my mother cried quietly, afraid our shelter would be taken from us again. Mr. Hawthorne did something that stunned us all. He offered us permanent work and a place to stay. "I won't promise comfort," he said. "But I will promise safety." My mother fell to her knees, thanking him through tears. And for the first time in years, I slept without fear. But safety has a price, and the kindness that saved us would soon be tested by a truth none of us were ready to face. For a while, life settled into something that almost felt normal. We worked. We ate together in the evenings. My sister laughed more. My brother stopped flinching at loud voices. Even Mr. Hawthorne seemed lighter, as if the house itself was breathing again. But peace is fragile when built on old wounds. One afternoon, a letter arrived. I remember Mr. Hawthorne standing near the window, holding it longer than necessary. His face tightened, not with anger, but fear. That night, he called my mother and me into the study. "There's something you should know," he said. The letter was from the city. About property disputes. About inheritance. About family. His wife's brother had returned. A man who believed the house, and everything in it, belonged to him. "He's coming," Mr. Hawthorne said quietly. "And he doesn't like strangers." 2 days later, the man arrived. He was loud, sharp-eyed, and smelled of arrogance. His gaze swept over us like we were furniture. "So," he said, smirking, "you've turned this place into a shelter." Mr. Hawthorne stood firm. "These people are under my protection." The man laughed. "You're weak. That's why they cling to you." His eyes landed on my mother. Especially her. That night, fear returned. The man stayed longer than expected. He questioned everything. Counted supplies. Watched us closely. He whispered things to the housekeeper. Things that made her colder, harsher. Then the accusations began. Food missing. Tools broken. Money gone. We were blamed. My mother denied it calmly. Mr. Hawthorne defended us. But doubt crept into the house like poison. Until the truth came out. One evening, I followed the man quietly and saw him hiding money inside a drawer, then calling out loudly, pretending to discover it. I told Mr. Hawthorne. For the first time, he shouted. The man was thrown out the next morning, screaming threats as he left. But damage had been done. The housekeeper quit. The rumor spread. And once again, we felt unwanted. That night, my mother packed quietly. "We can't stay," she whispered. "We won't be the reason he suffers." I cried. I begged. Mr. Hawthorne found us at the door. "No," he said firmly. "You're not leaving." He placed a hand over his heart. "You are the family that returned me to life." We thought the worst had passed, but fate had one final test waiting, and this one would demand a sacrifice none of us expected. Years passed faster than I realized. The farm grew stronger. So did we. My mother managed the house. My brother learned the land. My sister went to school for the first time without fear. And I learned how kindness could rebuild what cruelty tried to destroy. Mr. Hawthorne aged gently, surrounded by noise and life again. He taught us lessons no book ever could, about dignity, responsibility, and forgiveness. One winter, he fell ill. We sat by his bed, holding his hand, reminding him he wasn't alone. He smiled weakly. "You saved me," he whispered. "No," my mother said. You saved us first. When he passed, the house didn't feel empty. It felt full. Because before he left, he had written something that changed our lives forever. His will. He left the property, not to distant relatives, but to my mother. She knows how to protect what matters, he wrote. People talked. Some disapproved. Others were shocked. But the law stood. The house became a place of shelter, not just for us, but for others in need. Travelers. Lost families. Children with nowhere to go. Years later, I sit here now, an old woman telling this story. People call me Grandma with affection. They don't know how many times I was once unwanted. How many doors closed. How one door, opened reluctantly, changed everything. I learned something in that house. Kindness doesn't roar. It whispers. And if you listen closely enough, it can guide you home. If a single act of mercy can transform broken strangers into family, then perhaps the world isn't as cruel as it seems, perhaps it's just waiting for someone brave enough to open the door.